Hi, everyone. After a long break, welcome back to First Principles. Today we've got Jonathan with us, and we'll be talking about the first principles of coaching. How are you doing, Jonathan?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Okay, Jonathan, just for the context of this episode, I know you do a lot of things, but can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, my name is Jonathan. I am a interview coach based out of DC, and I've been doing this now for about a year for myself. But I've been in the tech industry for over 20 years now,
Hmm.
and I've been everything from an engineer to a technical program manager, to a hiring manager. And so I help people get back into companies, mostly work with people that have been laid off.
Right. Okay. And with that context, though, and generally as well, how would you define coaching? What's your understanding of coaching?
So I take a very sports oriented approach to coaching.
Okay.
I believe very heavily in like exercises and working with people on their game, so to speak.
Hmm.
Um, I actually take an approach that comes from a sport that I love to do, which is jujitsu. I've been doing jujitsu now for like 15 years.
Right.
And the way we run classes is we're going to show a technique for a couple minutes, and then we're going to practice it the remaining time in the class, and then we'll do like a live simulation,
Hmm.
what we will call like a sparring round. So that's what coaching is to me. I know for many people it's sort of like a different definition. There's some guidance, and things like that, but that's what it means to me. It's like I'm showing you something, and then we're going to practice over and over and over until you get it down.
Okay. Why do you think there is like it's kind of like an amorphous term, especially when it comes to mentoring and teaching as well. So that gets confused and lumped up with it. How do you, if at all, do you categorize these three different things?
That's a great question. I mean, for me, because I tackle it from more of like a sports oriented approach, I don't know. Like to me, there's a difference between mentorship and coaching.
Okay.
I'm not a mentor, right? I'm not telling you what to do every single day. I'm not showing you what you're going to do throughout your entire career.
Mm.
I'm coaching you on how to perform well in an interview. That's my goal.
Okay.
So there is some guidance and some mentoring that I do, but it's more of someone has to pull instead of me pushing. Like I'm not broadcasting advice. I'm waiting for someone to tell me, here's where I'm stuck, and then we work together to come up with a way to overcome that obstacle.
Okay.
So yeah, it's an interesting thing to me to see like how people are kind of like defining it on their own.
Yeah. Yeah. But do you agree with that, or do you are you happy with the fact that this is kind of like an individual thing? So that's how they define it, or do you think there should be like one North Star?
Yeah, no, yeah, that's a great question. And I think it like success, success is a very subjective thing. Like
Mm.
it means something very personal to me what success is, and that's different from what success means to you. And over the years, my definition of success has changed. So I think coaching can be that as well. It can be very subjectively defined. Um, what are there's different goals for different coaches, different areas. So I don't think that there's one right answer.
Mm.
But I'm always open to discussion and exploration around it. But to me, it's very I just think of it as like we're working with athletes. Like we're just not throwing balls or we're not lifting weights or something.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. The broadest definition I've come across for coaching is you help people get from A to B. Now, that is pretty broad because you could help them from getting A to B, even if you don't know the subject matter, because something else might be at issue, like the inner work needs to be worked on or something like that. When it comes to mentoring, rather, you need some subject matter expertise, I would think. And then teaching, I think you need a little bit more subject matter expertise. So when it comes to your particular kind of coaching, where you are basically coaching people to get hired in an interview,
Mhm.
what how do you approach it? And then I want to get to how do you sort of you select candidates, like somebody is coachable or not?
Yeah, so I approach coaching in the way that you define mentoring. So maybe I am doing more mentoring in that
Okay.
definition. So it's I'm working with someone to work like to polish, maybe is the right word, a very specific area that they need help with.
Right.
Some people need help with their communication skills. Some people need help with their technical skills. So I tailor my coaching to that specific need.
Right.
I don't think that I would be successful if I didn't have the expertise in the area or the experience of going through it myself.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't think that what I do can be generalized to all positions and all fields.
Okay.
I I have turned away many people that are in, roles that they're just out of my wheelhouse. Like I can never help somebody who does sales. I can never help someone that does marketing
Hmm.
because I don't know exactly what a hiring manager in that area is looking for,
Hmm.
but I do know what hiring managers are looking for in tech. So having gone through that, not only as a candidate, but also as a hiring manager, that helps me give, I think, the most effective coaching that I could do. And it's all like study and practice. So yeah, it's interesting that you've come across those two definitions because I think for me it's flipped.
Yeah, no, I mean, in preparation for this podcast, I went down like multiple rabbit holes because it's again such a big topic, and this is going to be shorter than my general episodes because I don't think I have a lot to contribute over here, and that's the reason why we kept it that way. Okay, when it comes to, let me just think a little bit more about it. The when does somebody know they need a coach? Because there's also a situation where people want to just do it themselves, and especially in a more sort of individualistic culture. It's a good thing
Yeah.
because you're not just relying on other people. But so what's the sweet spot? Because sometimes, and I say this because a lot of folks, they want somebody to help them, but essentially they're projecting all the actions that they're supposed to do on the other person, and then
Mhm.
they get somebody else to blame. And have you come across that?
Luckily, I haven't had that, knock on
Good.
wood, I haven't had that particular situation. But I think for me, when you need coaching when you've come across a hurdle that you can't overcome. Like you
Hmm.
can't, for example, let's take phone screens. You can't pass the phone screen.
Hmm.
You try, you study, you do all of the advice that people give you, like, and it's still you just can't pass the phone screen.
Hmm.
Well, now you're stuck. So now you need someone with an outside perspective to come in and tell you like something else you might want to try.
Hmm.
And for me, because I am not only it's like a hair club for men. I'm not only the president, but I'm also a client. Like
Right.
I have benefited significantly from being coached, which is why I wanted to go down this rabbit hole.
Hmm.
And I only look for a coach when I'm stuck. So I get to a point where I have tried everything, I've exhausted all of my options, and now I don't know what to do next.
Hmm.
So now I'm going to go and find somebody. I'm going to pay them for their expertise to help me overcome that obstacle.
Okay.
And what I end up paying is peanuts in comparison to what I get on the other side. So
Right.
I think my clients also go through that too. Like when
Yeah.
they talk to me, they've been on the market already for 4 to 6 months,
Hmm.
and they've run out of ideas. So then I come and I show them something and they're like, "Oh, I didn't try that."
Right.
So, sometimes it's that kind of interaction. So that's how I see it.
So you said an interesting thing over there. I, compared to what I get, I have paid peanuts. Now, how did
Mhm.
you come to that realization? Is that the first time that you actually paid somebody for coaching? Was that like an understood fact because you had some prior experience, or it, did did you basically start seeing the benefit and then basically figured out this is going to be very valuable?
I want to say it was the latter. One coach that I've paid like I think overall something like $20,000 to.
Hmm.
Uh I the reason I got with him was because I was stuck. It's actually for a hobby, not for a profession.
Hmm.
And I felt like I was stuck. I wasn't progressing, I wasn't growing. And I went to one of his classes. He was doing like a guest class. And in that hour, he showed one detail that I've never thought about. And I tried it that in that class, and it completely changed my understanding of this like move. So I approached him afterwards and I said, "Hey, have you ever coached anybody or done like private lessons?"
Hmm.
And he said, "No." It was the first time he'd ever done a private lesson. And so he had to come up with a price and everything. And we agreed on the price. It was extremely reasonable. And then we worked together consistently for like the next 6 years, like 5 or 6 years.
Hmm.
And I saw immense benefit from working with him. but that wasn't what attracted me to working with him. It was
Right.
that like detail. Uh, so I had no clue like if it was worth it, if I was just throwing money out, down the drain or anything. I just said, let me try it. I've got nothing to lose,
Yeah.
maybe a little bit of time. Now, from a business standpoint, I've also paid for coaching as well. And there I did think about what's the cost and what's the benefit.
Yeah.
And when I look at the cost, it's like several times lower than what the benefit is.
Hmm.
And it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pay you money and you're gonna save me like 2 years of trial and error.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in. Like
Okay.
where do I sign? You
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Right. I've also read floatingly, so I can't give you a quote, but there is something known as emergent knowledge, or maybe I'm just making this word up. But like the more you try, I think it was in one of those trading guru kind of thing. And he was not a guru; he was like a training anti-guru on YouTube. But he was saying that once you keep engaging with your systems, as long as, of course, you've taken with the state of the art, but then now you need to engage with it. And while you engage with it, a little spark of knowledge, a spark of wisdom just comes in. And that might just be yours. And if that can be passed on, now I don't know how beneficial it's going to be for the other person because it's not coming for them, but that could be passed on. So is this one of the benefits, like this in these individual things that come in the emergent knowledge, because that's not really documented anywhere?
I think so. There's a lot of stuff that's like available in books and YouTube videos and all of that.
Yeah.
But it's one thing to watch a video and see this very like what's the right word? Like when you have a garden and it's manicured, like a very
Mm-hmm.
manicured sort of presentation.
Yeah.
It's another thing to try to like apply that live.
Right.
I can watch a video and it has great information and I love it and I like it and all that. But then when I try to actually put it into practice, that's a whole different story.
Right.
And having a person that I can ask a question to
Mm.
makes an enormous difference because I could say, well, I've tried that. Like for example, I've tried giving an elevator pitch before.
Mm. Sorry about that, folks. Sorry, you're saying elevator pitch.
Yeah, so elevator pitch. So when I can deliver my elevator pitch and have them basically tear it down and say, okay, here,
Mm.
I would like this part with a little more detail. At the beginning, tell me a little bit more about your background. At the end, tell me a little bit more about like why you're excited about this role,
Right.
right? So I can't get that from a YouTube video,
Right.
right? Um, so I do think that there's like an emergent knowledge kind of concept, and it's super situational. It really depends on what that person's struggling with.
Hmm.
I've struggled for years with filler words.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Same and I'm thinking and that kills me. If I say it too much, I even start thinking to myself like, oh man, I've said that like 20 times,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. So
A
yeah,
tangential,
I think that's a good concept.
a tangential question then. You said filler words, and I'm curious. If people use it just to be polite, or are they nervous because they can't stand silence? What's the reason people use filler words here?
That's a great question. So in another life, when I was
Mm.
studying for a PhD, I was looking at some of this stuff more so from like a public speaking standpoint. And I was a member of Toastmasters.
Right.
And one of the things that I read, I don't know if it was like in the material they gave me or in something else, said that filler words are it's like a mechanism that we've developed to tell the other person we're not done speaking.
Ah.
Rather than taking a pause, which has more impact,
Mm.
we would say, so what I wanted to say was blah, 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 blah. So you don't interrupt me.
Mm.
If I put a pause in, there's always an option for you to interrupt.
Right.
When you're doing public speaking, that doesn't matter because you're the only person with a microphone.
Yeah.
But when you're in an interview, if you're on a roll, you don't want someone to just randomly jump in. They're going to, derail your train of thought. So that's where that comes from. And in something like Toastmasters, they teach you how to control that, how to add the pause, and how not to worry about someone interrupting you because you have the stage.
Mm.
So I've taken some of those lessons and applied them to interviews. And yeah, it's a good question. and I found it like the reasoning fascinating. It's not like a flaw in your communication. It's actually like a mechanism to help you communicate better, although it doesn't seem that way.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's a good question.
In a conversation, though, I mean, this is a term which I think is unique to America because I haven't heard it outside. Uh, at least I haven't. I can't get a word in edgewise. I think what that means is somebody just rambles on, or they have a habit of just interfering, and that obviously can become a problem. It becomes a monologue rather than a dialogue. So I understand public speaking, but then in a conversational setting, how do you defend against people jumping in if you don't want, if you're not going to use filler words anymore?
Mm, that's challenging. I actually have a funny story about that.
Yeah.
I was once interviewing for a company that was a consultancy, and in my, I don't know if it was my second round or my final round, my interviewer told me everything and anything that came to mind. He asked me maybe one question,
Hmm.
and afterwards I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I blew that interview because I didn't say anything. And then I still got the offer.
Oh.
So it's like a weird sort of dynamic in casual conversation. And this is something I learned through one of my coaches. You want to continuously, you want to do like active listening. So you want to say, mm-hmm, uh-huh, yeah, okay, mm-hmm. You keep that going until you get to a point where you're like, all right, it's time for me to speak, and then you get your question in.
Right.
We can't do that online, right? Because if I talk and you talk, Zoom or Meet or whatever, they're gonna cut one of us off.
Right.
So it's very disruptive to do that in a virtual conversation. But in real life, if we're like in the same room, that's very easy to do, and it allows you to get a word in edgewise.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we still are figuring out the right etiquette in different contexts when it comes to this kind of synchronous but like far away communication because of the limitations. And you don't get to pick up on a lot of other visual cues. So like I've started speaking with my hands a little bit more on the screen because generally I don't do that. But on the
Yeah.
screen, it's just this is the only way I can express myself
Yes.
otherwise. Okay. One more differentiation question.
Yeah.
Coaching versus advisory or consulting. What's your opinion on that?
Mm. I think coaching is a form of consultancy.
Okay.
I am consulting. You're coming to me as an expert in a very special area. Um, but it's like on the fence between advising and consulting.
Hmm.
I can give you all the advice in the world, but it's completely up to you whether you want to follow it. Right?
Okay.
Right? I actually worked with a client once who wouldn't follow any of my advice and then was very upset that
Hmm.
he wasn't getting the results that he was after. Um, so it's that whole like I can take a horse to water, but I can't force it to drink kind of thing.
Right.
I can show you things that will work. Um, you have to trust me. And if you don't trust me, why are you working with me?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
so yeah, it's a weird sort of like place to be in.
Right. Right. I'm just trying to pin it because, okay, how about this? A military drill sergeant, once you just enlisted, is that similar to coaching as well? Or is that a relationship more intimate and more authoritarian?
That's more authoritative. People might take that approach. That's not my approach. My
Okay.
approach is more like you're going to drive where you want me to sort of help you out.
Right.
So if you were joining my military, for example, you the soldier would tell me, "Hey, drill sergeant, I'm stuck on this one thing. What do I do?" And then I
Mm.
would tell you, "This is what you have to do."
Okay.
Instead, a drill sergeant would say, "Hey, why are you doing it that way? That's not the way we do it here."
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that I don't think is helpful. I don't want to completely rewire somebody in the way they deliver their responses or in the things that they say.
Yeah.
I just want to clean it up a little bit so that it makes a good impression.
Right.
And so it's more of like I'm shaping them as opposed to I'm just rebuilding them from scratch.
Right.
I don't, and I was actually having a conversation about this earlier today. I'm not teaching you anything new. I'm just using what you already know and what you can already do.
Yes.
And I'm just focusing the lens a little bit. Like I want this like very precise laser to come out, right? And just on this one spot. That's really what I'm trying to accomplish.
You mentioned the term outsider perspective a few moments ago when it comes to, the kind of help that you're offering clients. Now, here, Now, where's that perspective coming from? Just dealing with clients in other clients, or also having some, I hate to use this term, but insider information in the sense that what hiring managers would want and what the industry trends are? Like, is this some actual intel, or is that combined with a new strategy?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
So I have a lot of friends in the industry that, at this point in their career, they're in managerial roles, they're in decision-making roles.
Right.
Uh, I keep in contact with several recruiters. So I'm often asking them, like, hey, what is it that you're seeing on the market? From an interviewing perspective, what are some of the things that you see candidates struggling with?
Hmm.
So behind the scenes, I have a ton of conversations, a ton of data that I've been collecting, and that helps me put together uh, a much more refined approach to interviewing,
Right.
right? So one thing that I've been doing recently is I've been talking to job seekers who are going through this but haven't yet landed a role.
Hmm.
These are not people I'm trying to convert into clients or anything. I'm just listening to their stories, and they're confirming some of my assumptions, they're challenging some other ones. So I'm constantly changing my approach based on the feedback I'm getting from the market. So it's very much a fluid thing. It's definitely not one size fits all.
Hmm.
It's definitely not some of the things that you're going to find on websites and YouTube videos. It's like what I'm working on, and then I'm using the feedback from job seekers, from my clients, from recruiters to make sure that we're making the most, the best impression possible. And really my goal with coaching is how do I make candidates memorable? Is it through storytelling? Is it through their preparation or their research? Right? So I'm working with them from the moment they apply all the way until they're negotiating their offer.
Hmm.
And I'm very hands-on. My program is very hands-on as well. I don't want to just give people a bunch of videos and be like, just watch this. Instead, what I would actually do is I'd be like, hey, this person over here, fantastic, watch their videos.
Hmm.
And then we'll work on the stuff that they're teaching
Right.
in my program.
Okay. Um, I'm just trying to think how I can pose this next question because I don't want to miss out on details. So I'll probably start with an example. A prospective client comes in and they are like the either end of the spectrum, right? So one is that they know it all, they can do it all, and that might be hard. I don't think that will be a coachable client, but we'll see. And then on the other end of the spectrum is like they know nothing, they have no power, right? So they just want somebody to just you do it. Now, how do you're not basically let's say a business process outsourcing service, right? I'm not going to do it for you. I will make you do it. Now, how I'm sure the ideal coachable client is somewhere in the middle. Now, what's that middle for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you mentioned two extremes that I
Yeah,
don't tend to work with.
yeah.
I don't tend to work with the person who's the know-it-all.
Hmm.
Not so much because um, I don't think I don't, how would I say this? I don't work with the know-it-all because they're not receptive to feedback.
Hmm.
Or rather, they tend not to be receptive to feedback.
Right.
They tend to say, well, I've tried that. And then if I would say, well, let me show you how I do it,
Hmm.
they would say, no, 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 I've already tried that. Let's do something else.
Right.
Right. So that's a person I can't work with. Not so much that I don't want to, but I can't. I know that I'm not going to be effective. The person that wants me to do things for them is unrealistic. I'm not going to go to the interview and do it for you.
Yeah.
Right. That's not to say that I won't help them through the application process or with their take home assignment or, um, crafting a response to an email.
Hmm.
I'll do it with them, but I'm more of the like the consultant they bring into like a call. They'll be like, "Oh, well, let me bring in my consultant. He's an expert in, whatever."
Yeah.
And then we're in the room together. So it's more like done with you as opposed to done for you.
Hmm.
I did have one person early on, this was when I was first getting started. She said, "Well, can you write my resume for me?" I said no for two reasons. The first one is the resume is really personal.
Hmm.
If I start messing with the resume too much, it's like I'm telling you to change as a person.
Yeah.
Some people get very offended by that. So I don't want to do that. The second thing is, of all parts of looking for work, I find the resume writing to be the most boring thing for me.
Hmm.
And I don't want to do that. So I told her I cannot help you with that. But let me put you in contact with someone that does. So that's another thing that I have that I'm like very fortunate of is I have a network full of people who are coaches themselves or they do resume writing, they do the done for you approach.
Oh,
So even if they don't work with me, I still try to give them some value. That
right,
could be an introduction to a coach, to a resume writer, and so on. So for me, the sweet spot is you're extremely coachable, you're open to feedback, you've tried a lot of things, so you understand the value of what I'm saying, and you're going to put the work in.
right.
If you put the work in, I guarantee that you're going to get a job, and it's going to be fast. Because my goal is not to have you on the market for months; it's to have you on the market for a couple weeks,
Right, right.
and then you're good.
Just to double click on this a little bit, is this in any kind of market, or do we need to really readjust our situation of like finding a job depending on the market conditions? Or do you believe we are market makers so we can kind of like with the force of will change the will as well?
I wish I was a market maker. I think um, I my my approach is very market specific. It's very like how would I say this, right? I could say like the bigger, let me say it like this.
Hmm,
My approach is very industry specific. It's for people in tech.
right.
I cannot do consulting interviews. I cannot do interviews for sales and marketing. I can't do, chemistry or education or whatever.
Hmm,
I just focus on tech. If it's building product, if it's building software, if it's um, modernizing digital transformation, things like that, that's sort of in my wheelhouse
hmm,
because I know how the interviews are going to go generally. I know what components we need to focus on, and I know how you need to deliver the information that is going to make that impression.
right.
So overall, I mean, the market is in just it's like a disaster. But in the tech space, and this has been true for many years, we've sort of been shielded from a lot of that,
Hmm,
right? Like when the housing market collapsed, there were still jobs
yeah.
for tech people and they were still paying six figures.
Hmm,
So that part wasn't like we've sort of been shielded from a lot.
yeah.
So also as like an industry, we've kind of evolved how we've done interviewing. And one thing that I've noticed a lot, especially in like the last year or two, the trendsetters are really like the big tech companies. If they interview a certain way, if they ask certain questions, if they take, 5, 6 hours or whatever, all the smaller companies are going to be like, hey, they're onto something. Let's do it the same way.
Hmm,
So a lot of the stuff that we're seeing in like startups, um, in smaller companies, it's all influenced from big tech. So so I don't think that big tech has changed much. I mean, it's got more requirements now, but it's the same, they want the STAR method for your behavioral interviews. They're still testing the same things in technical interviews. It's just yeah. So that's I also turn away people that are not in the tech industry because I cannot help them. I don't want to take anybody's money
yeah.
if I cannot help them, right?
But you
Like you're
can
paying
refer
me for
them
results.
to someone.
I would refer them immediately to somebody. I had a person who came to me. She was a student and she was a mechanical mechanical engineer and she wanted to work in like robotics.
Right,
And I said, okay, I can help you with the coding part, like embedded software, but I can't help you with that kind of engineering. So I
right.
turned her on to a coach that's a friend of mine whose focuses with who I'm sorry, who works with mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, and biomedical tech engineers. And he's been working with her and it's been great.
Yeah,
So yeah, I'm
yeah.
okay with losing a sale if the value is somewhere else. That's okay.
So the way you're defining tech here is essentially computing and product. I mean, because tech, I mean, I think fire is tech, right? So not that way, but like in a very specific context, like
Yeah,
think
Internet
about
of
it.
Things,
Right.
SaaS, um, uh, different types of health tech, fintech, right? apps, websites, embedded software, that's sort of where I live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And are these tech roles in tech, or do you also handle non-tech roles in tech?
That's where it gets a little dicey. I
Mm,
try not to work with people that are non-technical in tech,
okay.
and I try to hand them off to somebody else.
Mm,
More so because I still enjoy that like engineering mindset. I love the problems that we have to solve in interviews.
right.
Uh, it's just fascinating to me. It has been like for my entire life. So I try to focus exclusively on people that are going for technical interviews, and we go from there. Um, but yeah, the non-tech ones, because I've met people who are in marketing, who are product marketing managers, and I'm always kind of like, well, can I really help them? And so I'll lay it out and I'll say, well, I can help you with some aspects of it,
Mm,
and I can bring in coaches to help with others, but I'm probably not the expert.
right.
And people sign up anyways.
Okay.
So it's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting the way it works.
Okay. There's an analogy, again, a differentiation analogy going on in my mind. So I'm just going to try it out on you and see how you feel about this. Is coaching to you, and again, coaching the way you define it, but it could be mix of mentoring, teaching, everything. Is this like a teacher in school or a professor at university? Perhaps that's a little bit more egalitarian relationship, but they clearly have more power, so to speak, because you listen to them. Or is it like a total peer? Because with peers, unless both of them really respect each other, I don't know if the advice would be followed. And of course, the success is contingent upon that. Or is it more like a king's thing in the old days, a king's advisor, where the king is a sovereign, he'll do what you want. But then you can strenuously advise it, do something like that. So what's your favorite here in the three options I've given you?
Yeah, my initial response was going to be more professor teacher,
Okay.
but then when you mentioned the king's advisor, I think I'm a little more in that realm.
Okay.
I For me, when I think about like king's advisor, I think about the show called The Tudors,
Right.
which was
Right.
around, for a
Hmm.
while back. And there was like the privy or the first hand, I can't remember what he was called.
Yeah.
And he would tell the king, like, king, the King Henry VIII, right? I don't think that you should do this. I think people are going to be upset, but then the king did whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like that. I
Okay.
I can work with a client and I can coach them and prepare them and everything else. But if they want to break all the rules in the interview, that's completely up to them.
Hmm.
I've done my job the moment that I've given you all the advice, I've given you the guidance, we've practiced. Now it's up to you to close the deal. I'm going to
Right.
help you however I can, but you are the boss in a sense, right?
Right.
And I work for you. Um, so yeah, I feel like I'm a little more of the like the court jester or the court, like the king's advisor.
Okay.
That's a good
Then
analogy. Yeah.
thank you. Okay. So one more then. How different is coaching or a coach? How different is a coach to a fixer? Journalists use fixers to go into like favelas in Brazil or like slums in Mumbai in order to report on something, and they organize everything for them. So
Mm,
is a coach a kind of a fixer as well?
I wish I could be. I I try to I try to do introductions myself. Like if I know that I have a client that is a very gifted software developer, I try to introduce them to recruiters in the industry that normally have positions they might be qualified for. If I have someone in my network that works at a company that they want to work at, I make
Mm,
the introduction.
mm,
So there are things that I try to do to sort of get there and be the fixer, but a lot of it's sort of beyond my control. I
yeah.
can't force somebody to interview my clients,
Right. Right.
right? And it's also kind of I have to be careful with that because if I do that too much, it can become annoying. It can damage my relationship with the person who I'm referring them to or making the introduction for.
Right.
But I try as hard as I can because my goal is to keep people off the market as fast as possible, like to get them off the market as fast as possible.
Mm,
In my research and my interviews and working with job seekers, the average job seeker is on the market for 6 months in this job market. The median is about 5 months.
right.
It's a little over 5 months. So if you think about how much money, think about the lifestyle that someone who makes six figures develops over time.
Yeah. If they're not frugal or if they're not
If they're not
careful.
frugal, if they're
Yeah.
not saving, right?
Mm.
Now suddenly you find yourself in this situation where it takes months for you to get a job.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you have enough savings to keep the lights on, but that's not always the case.
Mm.
Unemployment doesn't last very long.
Yeah.
It eventually runs out, and it's not enough to support your lifestyle at six figures. I spoke with one job seeker who said that he's exhausted his savings and he's now digging into his retirement because he's been on the market for so long.
Mm.
So if I work with that person and they're on the market for 12 months, well, now I'm just like stealing from them.
Mm.
I don't want that.
Mm.
So I want to get them a job within a couple of weeks. Most clients, when they come to me, they've been on the market for 4 to 6 months. We work together and I try to get them a job within nine weeks. The fastest I've gotten someone a job is 5 weeks. The longest was 9 weeks. And then I have a couple of outliers too, that are sort of pushing out like how long it takes. But it's terrifying. And when I work with job seekers, the feedback that I get is like, I'm so happy that I'm not going through this alone.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, are you really paying me to coach you, or are you paying me for like emotional support?
Yeah.
I feel like it's a little bit more on the emotional support side, like just having someone to vent, like when an interview doesn't go well,
Mm.
or having someone to talk to about strategy for applications, or trying to parse feedback from people and, what went wrong and things like that. So it's, I don't know if this is everyone's experience, but it's the way that I do it and the way that I find most rewarding. uh, it- this is something that they're going to take with them for like the rest of their life.
Yeah.
They're only going to work with me for a couple weeks, but they can reuse this in the next job cycle. They can use it throughout their career, you know. But that like, and I hope I'm answering your question. I feel like
Mhm.
I've gotten a little off track,
No, no.
but I do think that like keeping people on the market is for months. It's wreaking havoc on their mental well-being. I've met several people that have cried on a call with me because of how tough the market is. Uh, I had one person who I was very worried about his safety and recommended the suicide hotline. Like it's I don't know if everyone really grasps the severity of like what's going on
Yeah.
in the market. And this is, I'm only talking about tech, which is
Mm.
just like a portion of all workers out there,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? I don't know what everyone else is going through. I can
Mm.
only imagine like the horrors that people have gone through in this market.
Did you have to develop a certain kind of, let's say, shields in order to meaningfully handle these emotions that, clients come up with, the crying and the people who are like, a danger to themselves? And was it natural for you? And is this like a thing that a coach should accomplish?
I once worked with I'm going to answer this question with a little bit of a story. I once
Yeah.
worked with a therapist and I was talking to her about something that I was working through. And I said, "How do you maintain your like composure? Like
Mm.
we're talking about really heavy stuff here."
Mm.
And they had a term for it, and I don't remember the term, but basically they were saying like I'm disconnecting from the situation. Like I'm looking at it objectively, trying not to get too emotionally involved. And I have not been successful at that. When I'm talking to somebody, if they start getting emotional, I get emotional. If they tell me a story that makes them angry, I get angry. When people cry on the call, like it really impacts me.
Mm.
And it takes me a couple hours to recover from it. But what I've been, that's what's helped me get my clients the results that I've gotten them is because I care to that degree.
Mm.
And I spend hours studying. Like I would, I call this a labor of love. Like
Yeah.
I, I study, I practice myself. I've never said like my way is the right way. I've always said, okay, well, I know some things, I know they work. How do other coaches do that? Like, how do
Mm.
other coaches do elevator pitches? And I'll study that. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Oh, I like that. And then I incorporate that into the way I do it, you know?
Yeah.
So I have a lot of people that I've learned from, and I look up to them and I admire them. I tell them like, "Hey, I love the way you did this one thing.
Yeah.
I've never seen it that way, you know." And it might seem like I'm just blowing smoke, you know, but it's not true. Like I mean it, you know. When I say it, I mean it.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I haven't built that shield. I don't know if it would benefit me to have one. I feel like I need to keep it human.
Mm.
I need to have that emotional investment because if I don't, then I might not give it 110%.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
they'll feel that you don't really care, which sometimes could be a good thing because if you, like, I'm just imagining somebody, a doctor in the emergency room, and the person needs to get stitched up. If a doctor is feeling their pain, I don't know if they can do their job. On the other hand, yeah,
Yeah. Yes. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but
yeah,
yes, you nailed it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But on the
That's
other
right.
hand, if they don't feel anything, that might be a problem as well, right? Because then
That's right.
they're just apathetic. So again, hard to get that balance. Now, which
That's right.
brings me to coaching and therapy. How do you differentiate that?
I think there's a therapeutic component to it. Now, I'm not qualified to be to be a therapist, right? So I want to be very clear about that.
Yeah.
But there's definitely that component of it. Like there's moments in our sessions, especially when they're one-on-one, where I'm checking in with somebody and they're unloading like very intimate details.
Mm,
I mean, we're talking about like the money they make, their savings. That's not something you share with just anybody. You know, the fact that people are crying on calls with me,
mm,
to me, is telling me that they're opening up to me in a way that maybe they haven't to anybody else.
yeah.
And so I have to be very careful, not just about like what I say, but like the responsibility, like that, like I need to take care of that trust that they've given me.
Yeah.
You know, I can't, yeah, I just keep coming back to that. Yeah, I can't develop that like disconnect because they need that, you
Mm,
know.
yeah.
Some people need to vent, some people need to get so much off their chest, you know, like being laid off is a traumatic event.
Mm,
Not being able to find work in months is a traumatic event.
yeah.
Like they're going through a lot and you know, people lose their health care so they can't get therapy,
Yeah.
you know. So it's again, I don't know if this is just my experience, but when I'm having a conversation with somebody, like I'm feeling what they're feeling, I'm going through it with them, and like I also have to kind of lower my, you know, my guard and all that because I need to like see things through their eyes, right? Like
Yeah.
if I recommend something, I can't recommend something that makes them so uncomfortable, right? After already being uncomfortable,
Yeah.
it's just going to be too painful for them to try.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm very careful about that. And I think it's almost like bleeding into like I'm kind of a therapist, kind of a social worker.
Mm.
And I have a sticky note right here that I'm looking at that says, "You're not a therapist." Like I need to remind myself that I'm not a therapist because I don't want to say something that could make things worse, right? I'm not a life coach.
Yeah.
I'm helping you with interviewing.
Yeah.
It's like a fraction of your life. It's a fraction of your career,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's something that like makes people feel fulfilled. Like it gives you security, it gives you confidence, you know? And so
Yeah.
I love this stuff. I could talk about this for days.
Yeah. I mean, if you are in a full-time career, you're kind of spending one third of your life over there. So it's important that you get it right. And
Exactly.
yeah, I have this hobby horse that I'm talking about, I guess, on every episode now, where the relationship people have with employers, I think it needs to be clarified because nobody can guarantee you a job for life and a pension for life. Nobody can do that. They're lying if they have to do that. They'll have to print money in order to do that, right? It is about value for value in a certain aspect because you are getting paid, but they get paid once the profit is realized. So I think it's best to look at every employment contract that you have as like a tour of duty, at least in the US military, because of course, soldiers in other countries can sometimes, it's like a job for them as well. And then keep developing that skill because that is more important. People basically, in my experience, apart from the money, apart from the burn rate, apart from the mortgage and all of these things, they are like, oh my God, what did I do wrong? Am I wrong? What did I get fired? I'm like, it's a market condition. It's okay. I mean,
Hmm.
you find something, you have to start something, and this is a dynamic market. So that becomes a problem. A lot of like Luddite fears about AI and all of these things are coming from that because they're not really getting the benefit. If they somehow are made the beneficiary of this direct ascension of technology, we'd be happier. But in the meanwhile, we need a career. So that is important. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can I
sorry.
say something,
Yeah,
one
yeah,
thing
yeah.
about that?
Yeah.
So in my interviews with job seekers, um, I asked them a question, and it's what purpose does having a job have for you, right?
Mm,
And so the answers I've gotten have ranged considerably, but generally speaking, it's the same theme.
mm,
Number one, it's I want to take care of my family. And that is across like cultural boundaries and
mm.
everything, right? Like everybody wants to take care of their families. Even if they're single,
Yeah.
they still have parents, they still have, right?
Mm,
The other thing is they need a sense of fulfillment. For a lot of people, maybe only in the US, I don't know, but for a lot of people, their work is part of their identity.
yeah.
Like what they do is part of who they are.
Mm,
And that not being able to get a job is like, oh, I'm not good enough. Like the person, am not good enough.
yeah.
And it's like, but hold on, that is not you. This is the market, and you are you. Like there's a separation here,
Yeah.
but they don't see it that way. So there's that, and then the other thing is of course they want the security, like to take care of their basic needs, food, and the cost of food has gone up.
Mm,
The cost of living has gone up for a lot of people, and they're like, well, I don't think I can afford my lifestyle. I don't think I can afford my, whatever. And there's a sense of like freedom that comes along with all that, right? Like the ability to travel
mm,
or the ability to buy, a pair of shoes you want.
yeah.
You can't do that when you don't have an income.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think onto what you were saying, I was kind of thinking you were going to go in this direction, but I feel like at least in the US, I don't know about in every country, but there's almost a sense of like your employer takes care of you. Like your employer is supposed to take care of you,
I mean, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But they say it very clearly in the documents you have to sign. Like this is completely voluntary. Like we're not forcing you to work, and
Yeah.
you're not forcing us to keep you hired. Like we
Yes.
can end this agreement at any point in time.
Yeah.
So some of the sentiment that I see out there is like, how can this company abandon me? And it's like, well,
Yeah.
they're only paying you while they get value out of you.
Yeah.
Once they stop getting value out of you, you're out the door.
Yeah.
Or if you're too expensive or whatever, you know. And so I think that like in the tech industry in particular, there's a little bit of a realization that has come about because for years they've been getting deep six figures and stock options, and many people, have made tons of money.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden companies are like, we don't need 20,000 of you, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like a wake up call. It's like, oh, well, wait, hold on. This is not as stable as I thought it was.
Yeah.
I'm not as safe as I thought I was. That's new for the tech industry. At least from what I've seen from the people that I've spoken to, this is the worst job market for the tech industry in particular. Um, and like in during the lockdown, we didn't experience that at all. What we
Mm,
experienced actually was a boom.
yeah.
Many of these tech industries, like these tech
Companies. Yeah.
companies, thank you, they have like doubled and tripled their profits.
Mm,
They were on hiring sprees. Like what? Everyone else was, businesses were closing, people couldn't go to work.
yeah.
So, now that things have sort of shifted, they're like, oh, well, these companies owe us something. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. I don't know about that. Yes. Of
yeah,
course, they need to produce real wealth. You said that tech has been shielded for a while because for a while, only tech, I mean, computing has been producing some real growth in wealth in the sense of just not inflating asset prices and all of those things. I'm actually hopeful. I tend to remain hopeful, but then the rockets going up and the spacewalk and all of these things, they will open up industries. I mean, I think we'll have more jobs than we can handle. And the question is about having a kind of, I don't know, a training model in your own head that you can train and untrain easily, because
mhm.
that is what a classical education was supposed to do. And then we tend to, people joke, right? Oh, you're gonna like eat with your philosophy degree. Actually, the philosophy degree is gonna be the most important thing to eat with, because other things can be added on and left out. But and that's just my opinion.
Yeah,
Putting words in your mouth.
yeah. I mean, if you look at what's happening with AI, um, we don't really know what's going to happen in the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah. Or next year.
Right. So I'm not going to make a prediction about that,
Yeah.
but I I was having this conversation with a friend of mine, and we were talking about like what AI is going to do for developers.
Mm,
And I thought, well, what if AI is like the jump from binary to assembly or
mm,
assembly to like a high level programming language? What if that's AI for us? What if for programmers, it's like the jump between C++ or Java to, okay, now I can write a sentence and it builds the whole thing, which we've already seen
yeah,
demonstrated several times.
yeah,
So I don't know that it's necessarily going to remove jobs, but it will certainly change them, right? Like
yeah.
for a long time, typing was a skill, a very
Yes.
like important skill.
Yeah.
Now everyone can type,
Yeah. Shorthand. I felt
right?
like, yeah, that as
Shorthand,
well.
which
Yeah.
went away too. Exactly,
Yeah.
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 So I think that's sort of what we're seeing, and people that are learning about AI are going to be ahead of that, knowing the limitations of AI, how like AI's how these models are created, and things like that. I think is going to be extremely valuable in general. For a long time we thought, well, if you have computer science education throughout school, people are going to be okay. Well,
Yeah.
okay, that same thing happened to math. That same thing happened to science. So, I think we're just seeing like a shift, but it's not, people have had the same fear since the Industrial Revolution. Like,
Yes.
so we're always in fear of automation,
Yeah.
but I don't think that, our industry is going to just completely disappear. I mean, people still need to maintain the models. They still need to maintain the systems.
Yes.
But how is it going to change? We don't know. I
Yeah.
think it's too soon to tell.
Yeah. And of course, like in Top Gun, when the pilots were losing their dogfighting skills, they kind of made a conservatory out of those skills. So that might still be needed. I think it's best if we keep a positive attitude, even though things are crumbling, because, well, what else have you got? Right. I mean, this
I
is a way
agree.
to get out.
I
Okay.
agree. Yeah. And there's many other industries where there's talent that's they're not going there because tech was like the place to be. And
Mm,
so people that would have gone to medicine might have gone to tech.
yeah.
We might see a rebalance. We might
Yeah.
see people saying, well, right now tech is not a great place. Let me go medicine. Let me
Yeah.
go, something else.
Aeronautics, or,
Yeah. Yeah.
like,
And that's perfectly okay. I mean, we
yeah,
need we need all those people.
we
Like
do.
we can't all just be software developers.
Yeah. I
Like
mean,
that doesn't make sense. We need
uh,
doctors, we need people to make food. Like,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Totally. Totally. I mean, the dynamism of a properly run capitalist market, it has great upsides. The small downsides are that your right to stagnation gets taken away. But in the long run, it's good for you and society, because you can't just milk one skill. So it's better to have like a meta skill in your mind with classical education, and then add skills. So, I mean, again, my opinion, but I'm just finding it annoying that this is a realization hitting like a lot of people. I'm like, guys, you're not in the Soviet Union, man. This is normal. So I don't know. And anyway, two last questions, because we are at the near of the hour. So I'm sorry, I
sure.
might go a little over.
Yeah, no worries.
So I'm, again, another metaphor is coming to me is like locks and keys, right? So a client comes in and you tell them, or essentially suggest to them, again, the state of the art, or the best amongst best, the best heuristics, all of those things. And they agree that this will work for them. They feel good, all of those things. But for some reason, they can't lock in. So do you also find some subtle mechanism where they are not able to essentially integrate or embody that particular suggestion of yours and then go to it? Or do you need to always just come up with a new strategy for them?
Okay, so I think I understand your question. Let me see. So when a client comes to me, if they're not if they're not getting the wins that I'm hoping they're getting,
Hmm.
I usually have to do like an assessment. And my
Okay.
assessment is I'm going to do a mock interview.
Ah.
In the mock interview, I should see everything that's going on in a real interview. And the way I do it is I simulate a real interview. So I'll say, okay, we're going to have a timer.
Hmm.
I'm going to ask you these questions. I don't tell them ahead of time what the questions are, but I'm going to ask them like 3 or 4 questions. And then I'll evaluate their answers and then I'll give them feedback.
Hmm.
Then we do it again, same questions. And then when I feel like they've got it, we go to another set of questions.
Right.
And so in doing that practice, I can see how they're implementing it. If I were to just give them a lecture and be like, all right, we're done, have fun, good luck, it's it's not going to work. I
Hmm.
actually was doing a mock interview with a client of mine on Friday, and we went over a story that we both put together. for a behavioral like response basically, and it was just packed full of details. And I said, realistically, you don't have enough time to go through all those details. They have more questions to ask you. So then I helped her simplify the response and then practice the response a couple times.
Mm.
That's the way I do it. So for me, like if like the key isn't opening the lock, like let's look at the key. Like what's wrong with the key? Is it the right key for that lock?
Yeah.
Okay, now let's try opening it a couple of times. All right, let's try different ways of opening it, you know?
Yeah.
Um, that's what I've found successful. But again, it's a very like hands-on approach. I'm like the yoga instructor that like repositions your body because
Yeah.
you've got the pose wrong, you know?
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people don't have that. It seems like it's too much work, but it's like I love doing it, first
Mm.
of all.
That is the work. I mean,
Yeah, but that is the yeah, exactly.
yeah.
That is the work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think this is very it's been very useful. I want to end this by like a random question here, random to me and to the topic. But since you are an expert, what is an interview exactly? Is it like a date? What is really an interview? What are they? Is it a vibe check? I've heard so many definitions over here. What are they trying to get at that they haven't got at with my CV, with my LinkedIn, and all of those things?
That's a good question, and I actually did research on it because I was like, why is it called an interview?
Yeah,
And initially I thought, well, an interview is in more of like a traditional sense is like someone asking you questions. So it's more of uh like a verbal questionnaire.
yeah,
But then one of the definitions of interview is like an exchange of information. And so then I started to think about like what are interviews and the way that they're done, let's say in tech. Well, it's an exchange of information. Technically, I'm interviewing you like you're interviewing me. Technically,
right.
it doesn't always go like that.
Mm,
So for me, an interview really should be a conversation. So one of the goals that I have when I'm working with somebody is how do we turn a Q&A session into an interview?
right.
We do that by asking questions.
Mm,
You're asking me a ton of questions. I'm going to respond. Eventually, you would ask me another question, right? Well, if I want to also interview you, I have to ask you questions as well.
yeah.
In doing that, now we're exchanging information. For me, the value of an interview is not knowing if you can answer trivia questions. That doesn't mean anything to me
Yeah.
because you can Google them. You
Yeah.
can go to ChatGPT and get the same answers. I want to know as a former hiring manager, as an interviewer, I want to know what it's like to work with you.
Mm,
If I can get a sense of what it's like to work with you every single day, I can also then envision you being my coworker,
mm,
right?
yeah.
So an interview in a tech sense is like a simulation of a brainstorming meeting. It's just a normal day. We're meeting at 10 a.m. 5 people are going to be in the room, and we're
Mm,
all going to try to solve a problem together.
right.
I'm not going to talk for 20 minutes in a meeting that right with 5 other people.
Yeah.
They're not going to invite me again, right? We're probably going to whiteboard together.
Mm,
I'm probably going to ask questions like, "Oh, have we thought about X, Y, and Z?" And then someone else will be like, "No, we haven't." Oh,
mm,
that's an interesting insight, you know? So if I can, and this actually comes from research. There was a research study that was done in Hollywood where the researchers were evaluating Hollywood pitches.
mm,
And so the question was like the research question was, why do some pitches get picked up and not others? What the researchers found was the uh, what they called the catchers, the people receiving the pitch. They're looking for very specific signals
mm,
in that pitch meeting. One signal, for example, is the person looks like a creative. Do they dress creatively? Or is their hair creative? You know, that kind of thing. They have a mental model of what that looks like.
yeah.
They also wanted to know that the person was excited, like excited about the product, because they have to do this show for 24 episodes,
Yeah.
right? Or for a 3 hour movie.
Mm,
So you have to be excited enough, and then you also have to take constructive feedback or critique or whatever criticism.
mm,
You have to be able to deal with that and let the producers, who were mostly the catchers, let the producers pitch ideas too,
mm,
right? So it's a collab. They called it creative collaboration or collaborative creative session, whatever.
right.
That's essentially what the job interview is. So once you have that in mind, Now the interview approach is very different.
Mm.
I'm not just trying to impress you with what I know.
Yeah.
I'm also trying to understand what is it that's like missing? What what have you not thought of? What have I thought of? How
Mm.
can we put our heads together? And once you can do that, they can see you as that coworker, they're
Yeah.
gonna give you an offer. At the very least, they'll bring you back and be like, okay, let's see. And then they're gonna say, well, they weren't the best technically, but I can work with them.
Yeah.
Right? That's what I want. Like that's a
Yeah.
job offer. You don't have to be the best technically.
Right.
A lot of people in tech get that wrong.
Yeah.
They spend 80% of their time preparing for that, but there's so much more that people are looking for in an interview. It's not that clear cut. So that research study was fascinating, and they had a couple different like biases, and they laid it out in a table, and they said like you have to dress a certain way, you have to speak a certain way. There was like 10 biases.
Mm.
So if you take that to the tech industry, what's a typical engineer look like?
Yeah.
How do they speak? What are the things that they say?
Mm.
Right? All that. If we fit that mental model, you are a fit,
Mm.
right? So
Yeah.
it's more about deciding what the fit is. Can I work with you? Can I put up with, how the way that you speak and the way you think for 40 hours a week?
Right.
If that's the case, I see you as my coworker. I'm going to give you an offer.
Right. Okay. Well, this is a PR exercise, which is
Yeah.
good to know because there is a well, not a hack, but there is a way in, and it's not all doom and gloom. So finally, Jonathan, how do people work with you? How do they get in touch with you? What's the best way?
Yes. So you can visit me on LinkedIn. My slug is in/Jonathan JONATHAN Corrales CORRALES, no space.
Hmm.
Connect with me, follow me, send me a DM. I'd love to meet you and love to talk to you. You can sign up for my research study. I post it as a call to action in the comments of every post.
Okay.
I'm looking to talk to at least 300 or so job seekers, collecting tons of information. I'll share market insights. I'll share the report with you when it's done. Uh, and if you want to, you can also visit my website to learn more about my program. It's www.readyaim.interview.com, all spelled correctly.
Okay. I'm going to include all of that in the show notes, and
Thank you very much.
thank you for coming on.
Yeah, not a problem. This was a like I think the best podcast I've ever done. I
Thank you
haven't
very
done many,
much.
but this is the best so far. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. I'm going to take that. All right, folks. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.